Okay, so we're going to try just a real quick one-off right here. Trying to test out this setup. Um, Basically, I'm kind of stuck in the shop. Overhead lighting's kind of crappy since how my shop lights got destroyed in the shop incident. Anyhow, just a real quick before we get into the longer videos. I've had a couple people ask about why I use the blade profile that I use as far as hunting and skinning, and if I can only choose one blade profile, why I choose it. And of course, everybody's preferences are different, everybody's needs are different, but this is why I personally choose the profile I choose and the reasons for it. So, I'm kind of having to straddle the tripod here. We've got the cell phone set up, no mount on it, so I have to caddy corner my tripod, put it at an angle. I've got the muzzleloader holding up the back leg, so hopefully I won't trip over it, but I'll just do two quick blade profiles here. Now, this is the old Schrade Walden. That is an actual Schrade Walden. This is what's called the Skinner blade. A lot of people refer to it as a Bowie, a clip point, whatever you want to call it. This is what she is. Now, the problem I have with using this for field dressing deer, it's a great skinner as the upsweep on the blade. Get my fingers away from it. The upsweep on the blade, and sorry about the reflections, it's the only light I've got in here. If you're skinning, actually skinning the skin, caping, anything like that, this upturn sweep will let you basically come into the skin, into the hide, and basically just fillet it off. The problem I have with this, when I'd field dress a deer, I start at the xiphoid and I split the rib cage. So basically you can, sorry I've got too many sticky out parts here, where your rib cage comes together right down at the paunch. You can feel that little cartilage piece, and you medical folks, you know what the xiphoid process is, but it's where the rib cage comes together and it's that little piece of cartilage. I will basically take and pull up a little skin, take my knife, run it just across, just to open up the hide, then I will go in under the hide. And then I will follow the middle of the rib cage up. Once I get the hide open, then the blade will go in to the rib cage. Well, as you can see, with this upturned point, when you put this into the rib cage and you start to split the deer, what happens, this always goes into the paunch. That is, for you folks that have never field dressed deer before, for you folks that have never had to deal with a gut shot deer, it's not a pleasant experience. I'll tell you right now. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen people, like I said, I'm one of the few people, I guess, from my understanding, that actually splits the rib cage. The reason I split the rib cage all the way to the neck is that way it completely opens up the chest cavity. You reach in all the way to the throat, cut the esophagus at the throat, everything comes out in one nice neat package. Well, even if you don't do that, most people, when they try to go in, and that's why they make the Wyoming tool, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. If you're not familiar with the Wyoming tool, that was the original gut hook. It was just a little tool, and they called it the zipper. Well, excuse me. But the purpose of that, or a blade hook cut into the back of the blade, is so you can't bust the innards, the stomach, the intestines, anything like that, opening your deer up. So that's basically just a idiot-proof way of opening a deer up without busting things. Anyway, what I have found I've always been a fan of the drop point. Now this is a modified drop point. It does have the belly recurve, but I bought this for my buddy Ronnie because he said he wanted to go deer hunting. Long story short, I ended up using his knife to skin all the deer with. But this has a low angle drop point, and so this, whereas on this with the curve and the upsweep of the blade, you can cape, you can get in, you can skin. You can pretty much do the same thing with the swept portion of this blade. What this keeps you from doing is when you go in and you start to split, and as I said, what I generally do, make the cut across just to get it opened up. Once I get to the end of the xiphoid, I start at the cartilage and I will put the blade in, and as I pull up, it's just like zipping open a zipper. And you can actually split a rib cage with a decently honed knife, decent quality knife. You can split the rib cage all the way to the neck with one hand. So what this drop point does is when you go in, it keeps you from hitting the paunch, because the paunch, i.e. the first stomach of the deer, is right at the junction of the rib cage in the back. So the reason I use this type of blade is because one blade does all. Now they always say no blade does everything. However, for 99.9% of my purposes, this blade does everything I need it to do. I can't even count the deer I've skinned with this, field dress and skinned. When I take the skin off, I save all my hides. There is very, very, very little flesh work I have to do when I pull the hide off. Again, I can get through roughly about 4 deer splitting the rib cage with this knife. And I have not touched this blade since actually the 5th deer. I have gutted, skinned, cleaned, processed 5 deer with this knife and have not touched it. And she'll still shave 5 deer later. So that's where I'll get in for you guys the angles we were talking about, beveled edges, which angles to put on. We'll get into that later. But this was just a quick one-off on if I can only have one knife profile, one knife blade, what would I choose and why. So that is why I choose the drop point, whether it has the recess or not. I like the recess. It gives you some leverage splitting the cage once you get into the chest cavity, but a straight blade does the same thing. But the reason I choose the drop point is to keep from, how to put it tactfully, making a god-awful mess inside. Alright, we'll see how this goes, and we'll get to a few more in a few.